for joining this webinar today. My name is Nigel Jones, and I'm Business Development Manager here at MPP Global Solutions. Okay, so before we get into the content of the webinar itself, a couple of housekeeping pointers for us. Throughout the presentation itself, you have the ability to ask me questions. You'll see on the control panel there's the ability to raise your hand, so feel free to click on that. Alternatively, you can type any questions in. I would also say we've got quite a few people on this, so if you feel more comfortable asking those questions perhaps separately, obviously after the presentation's finished, we have the ability to have a one-on-one dialogue, so I'll leave those options for yourself. Throughout the presentation itself, we'll also be conducting a poll. There'll be some simple online instructions for doing that. You can vote within your control panel, but that'll be a little bit later on. A couple of other things I would suggest is if the window at the moment is perhaps not taking up the full screen, look to maximize it. Maybe close all unnecessary windows you've got open on your desktop. Perhaps try using the dial-in number if anybody's experiencing any difficulties with the internet. Voice there, and also look at using or closing down, I should say, any continuous streaming services. So maybe if you've got Skype open there as well. Okay, so what we're going to be talking through is, as it says on the screen, we're talking through the television landscape itself. How has it evolved over recent years? We're going to be spotlighting some of those major players. And we recognize some of the old guards, some that have been around a while, and some of the newer market entrants to this space. Talking about connected TVs, I guess some of the challenges and opportunities that presents, so kind of classic SWOT analysis stuff. Looking at the consumer, fundamentally about those guys, so let's see how we can understand what they want and expect. And we'll be talking through a case study for Philips' own smart TV solution. Okay, so let's talk about the television landscape itself, and how has it evolved? Okay, so we're all familiar with what a television used to look like, some of us older than others, of course, there. But the TV itself is very much a different device nowadays. The wicker basket table is very much, I guess, a design classic that sort of stayed there throughout. But I guess what people maybe would have seen as a TV in the past, they wouldn't recognize that now. The TV itself, in terms of what you view on it, is also changing. There's very much been a noticeable, for example, slowdown in consumers, subscribers, certainly on, if you like, the cable and TV services, less so perhaps in the US, where perhaps those losses are more likely to be seen in some of the lower income brackets. However, there's certainly an overall, maybe topping out in some of the more, if you like, mature services. Terrestrial services, again, dropping year on year. For example, in the UK, BARB have reported a 40% drop over what it was 12 years ago. Although certain events, we'll all be familiar with the likes of live events, sports events and so on, things that are happening there and then, are very resilient to that. There are a number of, if you like, over-the-top services, OTT services as well. They're very much sort of coming into play, and they're very much some of the new entrants in this space. They're actually very much sort of, if you like, jumping on the back of this ability that technology is now enabling through things like connected television, through smart TVs. Some of those subscription services are, maybe again we've seen examples of the likes of HBO and Showtime. Now again, maybe sort of, if you like, maximizing out consumers now are wherever they are in the world, now have more economic problems now. Maybe they're not willing to spending perhaps the same way as they were, looking for different ways to do that. And we'll talk a bit about some of the ways some of the major players have adapted to that. So the likes of Time Warner and some with their TV Essentials products. Likewise with the Sky B, now deliberately attacking a marketplace with a product called Now TV, which is not even branded Sky. Cutting the cord, shaving the cord, familiar services there as well, things we hear now almost sort of, certainly in our own environments, very common. But at the end of the day, it has to be about looking at this from the consumer perspective. Almost how it's delivered, how the content's delivered to them is an irrelevance. The TV itself is morphing into lots of different devices. At the end of the day, it is about that content. It's about the consumer being able to find that relevant content, being able to watch it of a sufficient quality, being able to utilize those additional added value services, and they can understand how to use those services. And if it's done properly, we're certainly seeing that consumers are willing to spend. We can monetize that with them. So there are options in and around pay-per-view, subscriptions, micropayments now, so even breaking these things down to smaller value price points now they're comfortable with too. And also things like trial periods, which we'll come on to as well. Okay, so let's take a look at some of who the major players are across this space. So the TV, as we knew it, as a device, if you like, is almost being relegated to the corner. There's a number of new brands, a number of new companies now which are very familiar to most, some newer than others. The likes of Netflix perhaps had a lot of publicity in this whole area, in this whole space. But Apple, interestingly now, what they're going to do, one of the last things Steve Jobs had said is that he now had found the way, he'd found the secret to, if you like, what TV could be, what TV should be. I'm interested to see how Apple take that further forward. Sky, by some now maybe even considered to be an older player in this space, been around for around 20 years or more now, and they're now very much, if you like, a mature player, but continue to be at the front of that. They continue to innovate, continue to drive forward all sorts of different monetization solutions there. And interestingly, again, a stat coming across here recently as March this year suggests that Netflix, their US subscribers watch 80% more video with them than all the other combined US pay TV operators. So again, very much a strong player in that area there now. So a newer entrant, but one that's doing significantly well. But what is it about now? Technology, as I say, is almost becoming, whilst it's an enabler for this, it's almost considered to be an expectation now. The consumers are in a position whereby they're in charge. It's very much from their perspective a buyer's market. And there are lots of ways that they're happy to pay for that content. So we've already said the likes of Sky in the UK have looked to diversify their their product offering now, and looking to sort of go away from, if you like, a traditional subscription-based model, which maybe now is maturing, and are looking to, if you like, tap into different consumer segments, different consumer markets, to say exactly how can they monetize different solutions there. Interesting, that's a product which is also powered by MPP Global Solutions. In the US, we have seen that example there of the TV Essentials offering again. And it's very much about putting the consumer at the center, that understanding what their wants and requirements are, and how we segment and tailor those solutions directly to what they want. Technology now enables us to do that. It's creating a far more cost-effective environment, and it's about ultimately delivering that content to them in the way they want to see it. We'll talk a little bit later about some of the national and international players in this whole arena as well, of course. But some of the major players still are the likes of Google, perhaps admittedly with an initial failure with Google TV, but now perhaps an acknowledged success is Microsoft Xbox, very much perhaps seen as the Trojan horse in this arena, with their new dashboard and their much improved interface, and also their existing relationships with some of the publishers in the music space and Hollywood studios. Now they're very much perhaps becoming the center of that connected home. Netflix, perhaps the most well-publicized of the newer providers in this whole area, are now continuing to develop new platforms and going into new territories and geographies, more recently Sweden, I think, this week. They did, however, have their own problems last year. Around about 800,000 users deserted them, partly due to an increase in prices, partly due from a change in their own business model, which is still a relatively new one, away from a traditional renting of DVDs. On a worldwide sense, however, let's not forget they have 20 million members worldwide, so a very significant player in this area, and that continues to grow. With it being a new channel, some of those content owners have seen that as been an opportunity to step into new channels, step into new areas, and actually, if you like, generate new revenues from their content. And in terms of the concept which Netflix has, back in 2010, so only 2 years ago, Netflix was spending $180 million. 2 years later, They're now spending nearly $2 billion on their content. They're also buying content from the likes of CBS and Time Warner. And if you want to have exclusive access to things like Arrested Development and House of Cards and so on, they're the go-to provider for that space. They're starting to very much recognize that content is very much key to this. It's the relevant content there. And interestingly, Reed Hastings, their CEO, has said that they're not competing with similar services such as LoveFilm, which I'm sure we're all familiar with, but they see themselves as one of their main rivals in the UK is actually Sky. So again, very much, if you like, pitching themselves against some of those bigger players there. Okay, but there are obviously some challenges to be had in this area. And Netflix is probably a good example of a business which is having its own challenges. Things like the licensing of content, certainly relevant. And so again, from a consumer perspective, now is that starting to cause consumer confusion, even frustration? Do they know where to go to find the relevant content, now to watch something that they want to watch? Who's that provider? There's high competition out there now. That proliferation and fragmentation, again, maybe still is causing some question marks in the consumer's mind. However, there's certainly an acknowledgement through these new channels, still relatively new channels, which this content is delivered, that things like broadband speeds are a problem. So in the UK, where they see 20% of people still having less than 20 megabits per second, and things like the endless buffering, the picture quality isn't what they would expect to see, certainly on a nice new television. Particularly also with an expectation at HD quality now, high definition quality now is becoming the norm. People aren't going to put up with anything less than that. Also within these new devices, we're traditionally targeting the innovators, the new, more tech-savvy people that are more, if you like, interested in having that latest technology. But in order to make this work in the longer term, we need to be tapping into a far broader majority there. Now, how do we bring on board that early majority and late majority also, who perhaps are less tech literate? They're more concerned about how do these services work? What do I need to buy? Is my connected TV Wi-Fi enabled? How does that work? And we're still seeing, of course, people that buy connected TVs are not necessarily actually connecting them. Samsung are often considered to be one of the major successes in this arena there now, whereas, for example, again, quite recently, further concerns and confusion over at Sony in terms of how they are adapting or not, as is the case in this area. Their PlayStation perhaps being certainly less successful than Microsoft Xbox, for example. Okay, but what are the opportunities there? Well, there are many. Lots of different devices means lots of different opportunities. Again, if we start to think broader than just the living room or even the home for these things, we have the opportunity for example, the content owners themselves now to have a direct relationship with their users, with their consumers, and they can sell direct to them and therefore have a direct monetization solution with them. The multiple devices themselves continue to change, continue to adapt, and the uptake in many, many markets across the globe there now continues to, if you like, extend that opportunity. There are many, many chances to generate lots of new revenues there now by delivering content in lots of different ways and breaking that down in terms of how they are monetized. Okay, for the next slide now, this strange spider which appears to be taking over the world is, if you like, talking to the point towards that the boundaries are not the same as they once were. It's very much an international marketplace that we're talking towards now. It's open to all. Technology via the internet means that consumers can, given the rights and doing it properly, access this content from across the globe. And the device manufacturers are starting to recognize this. Our friends over at Accenture have recognized the point there that 40% of the surveyed people pay for access to video content across the internet, so people are happy to start paying for these things now. And also 64% of online consumers use international online providers to view this content via their smartphones, for example. So again, it's very much blurring those boundaries, creating further opportunities for those consumers, and consumers that are willing to pay for this. Okay, so we're at the point now where we're going to ask your thoughts on this. You've listened to me for a short while, so what are your thoughts on this poll about other businesses which are in this space? Who do we see as having the most effective strategy for that success? Okay, there are a number of options on screen there now, so don't forget to vote for these in your control panel on the right-hand side. I'll pause for a minute now, once everybody gets a chance to take a look through, and we'll report back on these a little bit later. Okay, just give you another sort of 5–10 seconds there just to finish off. Okay, thank you everybody. I'll report back on those at the end of this session. Thank you. Okay, so let's understand the consumer again now. We've spoken a lot about the technology, I think, from a consumer perspective. It's taken as a given, rightly or wrongly. And the consumer themselves are perhaps confused. We're all perhaps guilty of it from time to time, of perhaps ignoring their needs and wants, or not paying enough attention to them at least. One sole consideration in this actually should be the consumer. It's very much about their ability, quite rightly so now, to demand far more than their predecessors. So thinking back to that old television, it's a completely new environment in which we're now in. To shamelessly plagiarize a Hollywood quote, with great technology comes great responsibility. How are we going to utilize that to our best advantage together? There's still a variation of that user experience across the multiple devices. Still a lack, perhaps, of that centralized rights management, which causes some concern to the consumer. So let me give you an example of that. They're less brand loyal. The likes of Netflix, the likes of Love Film and so on, offer things like 30-day free trials. They have the ability to raise awareness of who they are. The interface is quite nice. You can access the systems and so on, but at the end of the day, if the content is not relevant, are they going to stay beyond that trial period? That's a great challenge. The content themselves is actually coming outside of that living room now. That people are less likely to be sitting directly at that chair, directly facing the television there now. There's lots of change happening, and it's happening very fast. Ultimately, it's about that content being delivered to them in the right way at the right time. And even acknowledging things like whatever their specific behaviors are in this area, what's going to be relevant to them, what kind of content can we deliver to them, utilizing technology which is going to make it easier for them. Okay, so let's look at an example now. We have a case study here for Philips and their own smart TV solution, their connected TV solution. So we have a video running through there now, lasts a minute or so. You'll see it's very user-friendly. So the consumer now is sort of feel like within this environment has the ability to look upon what's going to be relevant to them. In this case, it's movies. They choose which movie they want to watch, and they have the ability to view it and pay for it. They're paying for that by one very simple registration process. They're providing their details, such as email address and so on, such as their chosen payment type. So things like credit card details are provided directly into the system there now, which is very much a centralized solution. It's a very slick solution. It's one which is, if you like, plugging in a number of CSPs, those content services providers, which are numerous. The benefits to Philips are, of course, they're no longer just selling a dumb, although it might look quite nice, box. It's now got a long-term revenue opportunity for them. They've taken the opportunity to centralize this. They've taken the ability to have, if you like, a one-click payment solution right across the piece. So once the consumer has provided their payment details, they can buy that content. In this case, we've provided in over 30 languages, over 20 currencies, multiple payment types are available. Things like a subscription-based model, things like a pay-per-view model. We can plug in those content service providers very simply. So it's a nice, slick, simple solution behind the scenes, of course, but again, thinking from the consumer perspective, it's one they can respond to very easily. Provide your payment details once, buy it, and move forward. As you'll see in the slide, it's actually provided by MPP Global Solutions. For those interested in more details on that, there is a case study on the MPP Global Solutions website. That's mppglobal.com. Okay, so in terms of the suppliers that are out there, the brands that are out there, the ones that we're all familiar with, where do you draw, where do you redraw, and how do you redraw those battle lines? Who's going to fade into the background? There are lots of well-known businesses, lots of well-known brands out there that have been around for a while, some newer entrants. Interested to see what, for example, Nintendo do with the new Wii there. But where do you draw the lines with that? It's glaring. The content owners, the device manufacturers, and these new services coming on board there now, even Tesco going on board to buying Blinkbox, for example. Interesting space. How do you draw and redraw those lines? Well, the answer is the future's in the hands of the consumer. That's what it's about. These questions are still to be answered ultimately, but the one thing is clear. The ultimate decider in this battle, as ever, is the consumer. Their purchasing habits and their demand for services, content and functionality, that will be the ultimate title decider in this battle among the TV heavyweights. It's one bout not to miss on any station. Okay, so let's look at those poll results. Let's see what you guys think. Okay, interestingly, quite an even spread. Who's the winner there? Interestingly, the winner is actually none of the above. Quite maybe an interesting acknowledgement there now that maybe there isn't one dominant provider, there isn't one obvious service that's actually going to succeed. Nobody has a definitive answer at this stage now. It may well be a new entrant that's none of the above because they're not around yet. It may be a new player in this space which continues to adapt and evolve. Interesting to see that sort of result coming back there, guys. Thank you for your input to that. We will publish those results externally as well, of course. Thank you. Okay, so do we have any questions? I'm conscious none were asked whilst I was delivering that. Just let me check if we have any coming through. That I think it's Jeremy. Good question, that's Jeremy actually. Jeremy says, what is MPP's position within this space? Okay, so MPP Global Solutions, we're not a market research firm in this space, so the purpose of this webinar is to raise, I guess, awareness of who we are and what we do. And we sit very much towards that consumer end of that supply chain. We're very much, if you like, creating that solution for them. We're an advanced e-commerce payment solutions provider, and we create the ability for our clients, be they manufacturers, be they content owners, if you like, to create and maximize and monetize that relationship with a broad range of e-commerce services. But that's wanted to sound too salesy on this. Jeremy, I'll perhaps pick that up with you separately. Any more? Okay, so question here now. So should a content owner go subscription or pay-as-you-go, or what's the best model? Okay, so let's think of that then. So that's very much towards, if you like, your choice, the content owner's choice. What we see is to say it's not necessarily an either-or. We're often seeing there's the ability there now, maybe Sky's a good example of this, that maybe there's an underlying revenue stream based on a subscription, based to say that there's a recurring revenue flowing through that there now. So there's some certainty. And you're always encouraging that user now to maybe spend more with you. But by providing additional options for that, so looking at things like pay-as-you-go in addition to that core subscriber bill, maybe in addition to a core bill almost there to kind of keep things separate from that, you're giving lots of different options. And that would be our advice, is to say at this stage where there's no definitive model there, don't put all your eggs into one basket. Look at different ways in which you can monetize those solutions. As they move forward, you'll find which ones actually work with you, with your customer, with your consumer, within your product. We'd suggest you look upon a different, if you like, broader approach to that at this stage. I guess as those poll results indicated, there's no one definitive answer. I think that's it from all the questions coming through there. Okay, well, thank you for those questions. Thank you for voting on that poll as well. We promise we'll take about 20-25 minutes to serve your time, so let's try and keep to that. On the slide there now, you'll see there's lots of different ways to continue the debate, continue the dialogue. Please feel free to contact ourselves. We'd love to hear from you, particularly picking up on some of those questions about how best we can help you guys going forward. We'll publish all of this separately, so thank you for your time today. I look forward to speaking to you all again. Goodbye.